With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Before we dive in, quick heads up. For a limited time in January, we're offering 25% off an annual Chase Club membership. Plus, anyone who signs up or is already a member gets automatically entered to win some awesome prize packs. We're talking about CompTrend subscriptions, discounts to future and lifted certifications, and more. Just head to chasingexcellence.email to jump in. All right, let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm Patrick. I'm here with Ben, and we are joined by a gentleman by the name of Scott Hogan. How you doing, Scott?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Man, we're excited to chat. You are the author of the revised and expanded edition of a book called Built from Broken, a science-based guide to healing painful joints, preventing injuries, and rebuilding your body. The book is out now. I recommend it. It's a great, the word I kept thinking about as I was reading this was robust. There's a lot of good stuff in here. There's a training program, there's rehab exercises, there's demos, there's good stories in there that sort of illustrate the principles that you're trying to unpack. And so kudos to you. The book is great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I wanted to start with actually at the beginning of the book, you lay out a distinction for us. And I think it's a good place for us to start. It's obviously the launching pad for the book itself. And it's this distinction you make between broken down, beat up, and bottlenecked. And you make a point to say that these aren't categories, that they're a spectrum, and that many people, if not all people, are somewhere on that spectrum somewhere, right? So can we start with that? Can you define for us broken down, beat up, and bottlenecked, and why those are the stops along the spectrum for so many people?
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate your comment on the robustness of the book, because when I wrote it, I'm thinking, I don't know if anyone's going to read this. 300 pages, it's very dense, but I felt like there was enough top 5 exercise type blogs on the internet. We're still in pain. So like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and hopefully a few people will be willing to read it. But people like you, I think were willing to go to the bottom with me. And I think that's what kickstarted it. So I appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as broke down, beat up, bottlenecked, broken down, I define that as basically you're in such pain. You've got so many issues in your body, muscle imbalances, tendinopathies, old injuries, and scar tissue that you're basically non-functional. So that's the extreme left side of the spectrum. The beat up are the people where most of us live. We've got a few different joint issues. Maybe we had a surgery a few years ago, hasn't quite healed properly. We've got some movement restrictions, but we can still do most of what we need to do day to day. And then the bottleneck would be really anybody else. I would even put elite athletes in this category. Even if they don't have a clear like red flag issue, there's some kind of constraint in their system that if they address that, everything's going to get better. I mean, with CrossFit, it's really easy to see that. You got strength, endurance, mobility. So if you've got a constraint in one of those categories, it's going to hold back your performance. But I think most of the people that read the book, and probably population at large, fall into that beat up category in the middle.
And is it the case that everybody lives somewhere on that spectrum? And why is it the case? Why aren't there people out there who aren't on this spectrum?
It seems like pretty much everybody. I mean, I've met some, genetic freaks of nature, or people that have just worked really hard, and maybe that you could argue they're not even on that spectrum. But even with them, it's like, okay, you've got something that's not as elite as the other categories. But yeah, I think that's the central question. Early on, I just realized most people are broken down by like weight training, by endurance training, all the stuff that's supposed to make us healthy. I told this story in the book, but a workout buddy of mine, he'd leave the gym every day and say, well, that's enough damage for one day. And I'm looking around like everybody's in pain. Everybody's hobbling around the weight room. What is going on here? We're supposed to be doing this to improve longevity and health, but there was this accepted thing of like, you've got to go through pain. Yes, but almost you've got to go through joint pain and destroy your joints in order to reach that next level of fitness. Fair enough. I've never met an elite athlete that hasn't gone through that, but something fell off to me. So that was kind of what opened up the big question. What's going on here and how can we solve this?
There's a group of people that don't that don't fall into this, and they're called toddlers. Toddlers aren't in pain.
We start out right, don't we?
Yeah, we start out okay. Yeah, maybe before we go a little bit, can we just like take maybe a pause on this word pain, because you kind of frame it up and you have a take on it that's certainly contra to I think what a lot of people think pain is, and maybe we get into how to solve it. But can you just kind of like frame up pain for us a little bit?
Yeah, the way I defined it, maybe this isn't the technical definition, but I define it in the book as a messenger. It's telling you, hey, something's going on here, something's wrong, and typically it's worth listening to. You know, I think I've worked with a lot of knuckle draggers, tough guys and gals that they'll just pretty much ignore it. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got people who are super sensitized where everything's a threat, especially someone coming off of a traumatic injury. It's like every movement outside of their comfort zone is perceived as a threat and might trigger that kind of pain response. But yeah, that was my central message: is pain is telling you something, and you can use it as a guide if you can tell the difference between, like, let's say DOMS, muscle soreness, and something that might be a tendinopathy or tendinitis flaring up. It's something like we might take for granted, but the general population, a lot of people don't know that difference. They feel pain and they're aching in their quads and they're like, I'm injured. So I think education around pain is really important, especially for novice people.
When you say tendinopathy, give us a little more on that.
So I think in the old days, they called it tendinitis, which was just basically a short-term inflammation of the joint, of the tendon or myotendinous junction. And then you have tendinosis, which is where there's a breakdown of the collagen base. So that's more of a long-term issue. Let's say 6 weeks plus, inflammation is no longer the main problem. You're actually losing connective tissue mass. You've got a degenerative problem. I would say modern thinking therapists are just using tendinopathy to describe the whole problem. I had a great conversation with Joe Cook about this, and it's really kind of the same spectrum. Tendinitis, like I said, it's by definition inflammation of the tendon, but most tendon pathology is a chronic load problem. You're getting a degeneration of the collagen base, and that's actually the vast majority of joint pain. I think this is important for people to understand. I went hard on tendinopathy because I would say, let's say 60 to 70% of joint pain is tendon pain. It's not cartilage, it's not ligaments or fascia. If you're excluding, let's say, non-arthritic age-related pain, just a basic healthy person, it's pretty much always tendon pain. And of that tendon pain, 95% is probably tendinopathy. So you solve tendinopathy and you've solved 80% of joint pain. So I'm always thinking in, constraint theory, what can we do that's a high fulcrum or high lever output? And I think tendinopathy is something that's worth understanding, not just for athletes, but for novices who are just getting into weight training.
Can we take one step back? I want to get maybe back to tendinopathy, but I want to lay the groundwork a little bit more. You've talked a few times now just about joint pain and joint dysfunction, and that's actually what you point towards as the primary challenge or obstacle to the spectrum we talked about: broken down, beat up, and bottleneck. Joint dysfunction is not a term that I don't know that I've heard before. So can you talk about that a little bit more and how it's related to the spectrum and how it's related really to everything else that you have in the book?
Sure. Yeah, I use that just as a catch-all for everything that's a problem with joints. What I've noticed, and this is not just with my personal fitness issues or fitness constraints, it's with working with people and observing. I don't think it's intensity or like exercise programming knowledge or muscle issues that's holding people back. It's usually joints. I would even say for people on the far right of the elite spectrum, they're working around joint issues. They're trying to improve load tolerance so they can handle more volume, more frequency. But I think that's what's holding people back, more so than anything else. This is what's preventing people from being able to move pain-free, do what they want, make progress. So that's why I made that the central focus. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And you write in the book, how can we manage our exercise, lifestyle, and nutrition habits to overcome the obstacles of joint dysfunction? That really seems to be the thesis of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes way beyond exercise or even corrective exercise. There's posture, movement quality and variety. There's some mindset that's involved here. It's kind of the full gamut. I think we need to take that approach if we're going to solve this.
Can you double click on that mindset end of things? Because I do want to go through what you've got as the 5 causes of joint pain and dysfunction, but the mindset one is I'm curious about that. Can you talk about what mindset or how mindset plays into injury prevention, injury recovery, all the other things?
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is the idea that all this stuff that has happened to you, all the injuries, pain, surgeries, whatever, that can be raw material for you becoming a stronger person physically, emotionally, mentally. And that's what I believe we're doing at Salt Wrap, my sports nutrition company. We realized at the very bottom of the stories of working with people, that was the through line where you'd see someone who's been through a traumatic injury and they overcome that. And so they develop maybe not self-confidence, but self-efficacy. Like, okay, I know how to do this. I can come back from something like that. So that mindset is really important. And I think that's something that just has to be forged. But when you're talking to a person who's riddled with pain, some of these people are sedentary. They've never stepped foot in a gym. They're not active. Some people are just kind of like, this is as good as it's going to get for me. I'm going to be in pain. I'll keep walking. I'll avoid that movement. It does require a different paradigm to say, look, this is not okay. You're going to have to go address this stuff. And if you do it the right way, you actually can become stronger. I can point to some specific examples there where an injury actually forced them to get elite in mobility or strength or something outside of that as a compensation. And now they're a better athlete because of it. That's probably the most important thing that I want to shake people of, like, the apathy, or not apathy. It's the acceptance of joint pain is just part of aging,
Yeah, it's interesting that apathy or that acceptance of, well, this is just the way it is, right? As you get older, you're supposed to move less, you're supposed to hurt more, you're supposed to dial things down, all these things. And it's this straight, there's no evidence that that's true. And yet it is also the only thing that people seem to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is accepted. As we get older, we don't just reduce intensity, we reduce our variety of movement. In the 40s age group, that's like a great time to start expanding different movement patterns and try new things. But most people do the opposite. They get more linear, like sit in my chair, I go lift weights, I come back to my chair, maybe I walk. So when you stop exposing yourself to those varieties of movement, like a toddler would, we become a lot less resilient.
Yeah, you say being sedentary all week and then playing golf or tennis on the weekend is the easiest way to get injured and develop joint pain. A higher level of fitness means lower risk of injury. This is the most important injury prevention from this book.
I think so. And I think it's important because most people live that way. Even myself, in my current season of life, I'm in front of the computer a lot more than I used to be. And so now I'm finding myself addressing the same challenge. It's like, okay, I have meetings all day. What do I do about that? So, you guys, I'm sure you've used the term movement snacks, finding ways to move throughout the day, increase just total variety of movement, and thinking beyond just the gym. Because most people are like, if I go to the gym an hour a day, I've done my job. Now I can just go back and sit. But that is creating a problem because you're sedentary and then you're going to do something very intense. Probably got some mobility restrictions that you're not going to take time to work through. So yeah, that's a very common problem and common challenge I think people have.
So let's if it is because I agree that it's joint more than other things, right? Let's say somebody has a joint thing. You can pick what you want, whether it's like an elbow, like a tennis elbow, an Achilles thing, a knee, back. What is the thought process someone should be having? Is it, the RICE protocol followed by rehabilitative movements, followed by more functional movements, or is it something else?
That's a good question. Back in the day, I thought I was doing all the things right. I played baseball all the way as I was a kid through college, constantly injured. And through that time, I thought I was doing everything right, taking my ibuprofen, getting my cortisone injections when my elbow flared up, and just not realizing I was completely shooting myself in the foot. There's probably better people to answer this question than me, but I think I talk about this in the book. I like the EduRep model, just for if you have one blunt tool to use here, educate yourself about what's going on, unload. So there is a rest period, and then reload and prevent. I think that's a much better way to think about it than just purely rest, rehab, and then go back to doing what you were doing. I think the education piece is what's missing. I do believe people should lean on therapists, lean on their physicians, but you can't really you can't outsource being your own mechanic in a way. So I think the education piece is really important. But yeah, we can talk about the RICE protocol, but when I go to physical therapists these days, it's a lot more heat, it's a lot more movement early rather than just resting. We know that movement is a really important stimulus for the healing process. So I'm not encouraging people to just work through it, but at the same time, just resting, icing, and waiting for it to heal is probably not going to it's not going to bolster the healing process. You're just going to let things calm down. Like the analogy is a storm came through, the damage is done and the storm is gone, but your house is still destroyed. It doesn't mean you can go back to life as it was. There's still some things to rebuild. So that's not a great answer, but RICE is
it definitely gets us down the path. So if we don't know how to rebuild our house after the storm, where do we go to get educated on that?
It's a great question. That's where I was at a few years ago. There's so many smart people, so many great pieces out there. That's why I wrote this book. I wanted to put together something that was comprehensive, not just comprehensive, but a roadmap. I can follow this from start to finish. But I would lean on a physical therapist. I tell people, like, you should be seeing your physical therapist quarterly. Go in for a checkup like you would with your car. Say, hey, what are the movement restrictions I have? What's going on? What's going to break down? That's a great first step. My book, not to self-promote, but I think understanding load training, how important load training is to not just prevent injuries, but actually heal injuries. It's kind of the only way your body's going to heal something like tendinopathy. But yeah, I would lean on therapists and try to stay away from Google and AI as your primary source. But you do have to educate yourself for sure.
Cool. Let's go. That's a great segue into load trading as being one of the more proactive approaches and beneficial approaches you can take to heal something like tendinopathy, where I think most people probably have the opposite paradigm, right? It's if you have a elbow, knee, or back issue, we should probably not be doing loading stuff. So why is loading such an important part to you?
Sure. Yeah. Again, to just continue beating on the tendinopathy thing, it's the only way you're going to heal tendinopathy because it's a breakdown of the collagen base. You need to actually kickstart the collagen synthesis process where your body makes more collagen, you're depositing more collagen. That only happens through load training or maybe some kind of crazy injection. But I don't think that's the way. Load training is the only way you can actually rebuild connective tissue. So I think here it's important to understand types of load training. There's isometric where you're just holding, you're basically producing force, but not moving. And then probably my favorite tool, if I could only tell people do one thing, just slow down the repetition speed. It might not be the best way to produce force or be a dynamic athlete, but if I tell people like, hey, keep doing your bench and your squat and your whatevers, but just slow down. Instead of jerking the weight around, slow down, 5 second negative, 5 second eccentric. What's going to happen is you're going to remodel a lot of those junky little scar tissue adhesions that have formed and prevent that net loss of collagen over time. So, I mean, that's a great entrance point is use load training, but don't go in blindly and just work through it. If you slow down, your body responds in a completely different manner than if you were moving fast. Not to get too long-winded here, but the analogy I use in the book is if you were to jump into a swimming pool and do a belly flop, the water doesn't really act like water. It acts more like a big plastic sheet that smacks you. And that's because of surface tension, or actually increased surface tension when you slam into it. But if you're to go into the pool in the shallow end and just slowly move your hand back and forth, the water acts more like individual molecules. It separates, right? And you can move your hand easily. And this is what happens with our body in a way. You're not disintegrating your joints by slow resistance training, but you are causing those, like collagen cross-links to break down in a good way so that they can rebuild stronger. So you're constantly kind of cleaning out the dead necrotic tissue and bringing new stuff in. So that's the big difference between slow and like very explosive training. Most people don't do that. Most people are in there just jacking weight. They're doing what I call curl cleans, leaning back and slamming weight. But if you slow down, your connective tissue is a lot happier.
It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the gains come from that. Biceps all day, bro.
Yeah.
What about, where does collagen supplementation fall in, if at all?
I think there's a pretty strong case for it. I wrote an article years ago, I think it was called "That Collagen is a Scam." And I talked about all the proposed benefits of collagen. It's good for your hair and your skin and your teeth and your organs. And it's like, what is this stuff, this magic elixir? And I would still stand behind that article. But at that time, the generic collagen research was not strong. It's kind of underwhelming still. But I would say even the average generic collagen is probably worth taking based on what we know about how it supports collagen output and collagen synthesis in your body. We use, again, sorry to self-promote, but I came across a company called Gelita. They're a German company, and they create specific collagen peptides that are optimized for specific tissues in your body. So the example that we have in our formula, it's called Fortigel, and it's specifically optimized for cartilage. And then there's one called Tendofort for tendons and ligaments. But what they've done is basically said, okay, this peptide profile most closely matches the tendon cells in your body. So when you consume it, you're more likely to kickstart the production of that. So the research on that is much stronger than generic collagen. So if you find any formula with those, you can see the research is a lot stronger. But yeah, we know there's an Achilles study. It showed like double the collagen deposition during Achilles recovery. There's a couple different really impressive knee studies. So I think there's a great case for taking, let's say, 10 grams of collagen peptides or collagen powder 30 to 45 minutes before training or even before therapy. And that's going to help just provide more raw material for your body to rebuild from.
As a anecdotal N of one, my wife swears by it. She can't walk down the stairs without knee pain if she goes off of it for a prolonged period of time. I've seen a lot of the back and forth in terms of the studies in the literature, so it's hard for me to take a hard stance on it, but it seems like if it works, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
There's nothing more convincing than anecdotal evidence, right? You take something, hey, this is working for me. I don't care what the science says, it's working.
We are brought to you by Mizzen & Main, performance dress shirts and clothing that look professional but feel like workout gear. I've spent the last 20 years basically working out of my house, so anytime I have to go somewhere and get fancy, it gets very uncomfortable very quickly. Traditional dress clothes are just too restrictive. They wrinkle if you look at them wrong, and by the end of the day, you're just ready to change into something you can actually move in. Good thing I've got a closet full of Mizzen & Main. Their dress shirts, polos, and pants are made with performance fabrics, moisture-wicking, wrinkle-free, four-way stretch, and temperature-regulating. They look like dress clothes, but feel like the most comfortable thing in your closet. Plus, they're all machine washable, so you can eliminate dry cleaning entirely, thank the goodness. Whether you need a dress shirt for meetings or a polo for everyday wear, they've built clothing that works for the way you actually live. Go to mizzenandmain.com. Use the code EXCELLENCE20 for 20% off your whole order. That's Mizzen and Main, MIZZEN and MAIN.com. Use the code EXCELLENCE20 for 20% off. We're brought to you by Gusto, online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. Your team's ability to focus on what matters starts with knowing the basics are handled. When payroll is on time, benefits are clear, and HR questions get answered quickly, your people can stop worrying about the small stuff and focus on doing the great work you hired them for. That's the chain. Good HR leads to happy employees stay focused, and focused employees build something that works. Gusto handles all of it: automatic payroll, tax filing, unlimited payroll runs for one flat monthly price, and direct access to certified HR experts when you need them. Plus, it integrates with the accounting software you're already using, so everything syncs automatically. We use it here on the show, and it's trusted by over 400,000 small businesses. That many small businesses cannot be wrong. Try Gusto at gusto.com/excellence and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/excellence. We're brought to you by David, a protein bar that actually tastes good and helps you hit your nutrition goals without a ton of extra unnecessary calories. One of the things I'm always trying to do is get 4 proper meals in every single day. I've talked about that before on the show. On busy days, the best and most effective way for me to do that and to keep the consistency I want is to grab a David bar. Either of their bars works great for this and for me and for you. Their gold bar has 28 grams of protein at just 150 calories, and the bronze bar has 20 grams of protein, also at just 150 calories. Both are made with high quality protein, so I can add some fruit to it, and I've got a well-balanced meal quickly and on the go. So no matter what your day looks like, David makes it easy to stay consistent with your nutrition. Right now, when you buy 4 cartons of David bars, you'll get your 5th carton for free if you go to davidprotein.com/excellence. That's davidprotein.com/excellence. You can also find them in stores nationwide. Can we talk about, I mentioned this already, the 5 causes of joint pain and dysfunction? We talk about posture, movement quality and variation, muscle imbalances. We talked about tendinopathy a little bit, arthritis, aging, and collagen degradation, as we were just chatting about. Can we just go through that list? I'd love to know more, especially under that perspective of being your own mechanic, which is a phrase you just used that I love, and I'm gonna steal. Can we go through each one of these with the eye of being our own mechanic? And given that these are the 5 causes of joint pain and joint dysfunction, and joint dysfunction is really the obstacle from moving from broken down to bottlenecked, or at least better than bottlenecked, could we just talk about each one of those? Maybe start with posture.
Absolutely. I picked those 5 because it felt like those were the 5 bad versions of those were potentially the root causes of what I was seeing as joint dysfunction. But yeah, posture, I don't think it gets enough attention. You go to the gym an hour a day, but your posture is in control all day long, even when you're sleeping. So 95% of the time, posture is determining your joint health. So, and it does work in hand with exercise. You can do exercises that support good posture, and then vice versa. You improve your posture, you can improve your dynamic posture as you're exercising. But I think a good place to start is behavioral. A lot of us spend a lot of time at a desk. So computer setup is key. So I talk about that quite a bit in the book. But yeah, I mean, something as simple as working on a laptop, it's almost impossible to have good neck posture on a laptop. You're looking down. It's very hard. So something as simple as raising your monitor to eye height, getting your keyboard in position where you're not crimping your elbows and jutting your wrists out to the side and going into this kind of like ulnar deviation where you're creating tension in here. That's what I try to focus on is what's the environment you can set up for yourself where you're just naturally aligned and you're not creating repetitive use problems. So the desk setup, and then just understanding what good posture looks like, kind of just stacking your bones is a very overly simplistic way to look at it. But I would say those 2 things, if you understand what good posture looks like in front of a computer in a chair, and then what it generally looks like as you're standing, kind of chin tucked, your shoulders are back, and being aware of that, it can go a long way, especially if you're supporting that with corrective exercise, doing stuff for external rotation, for example, to improve shoulder posture. As I say this, I'm kind of slumped forward.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I feel myself straightening up, putting my chin back. Like, oh, damn it. Scott's been assessing me from the first minute.
Well, everything we do in life kind of turns into a shrimp. It's like everything is about devices, computers. We're kind of, even like we're bench pressing here, we're rowing here, we're curling, everything's shrimping. So I think counter training against that is a good kind of postural idea of going into extension. I've got a Swiss ball around here somewhere, laying on it, kind of extending to contra train there.
How do you recommend people begin to raise the awareness of their posture throughout the day? Do you do anything to just sort of check in? Do you have any practices, any advice on how we don't get to the end of the day and realize, I didn't even think about it once?
I've tried the conscious posture thing where I'm like walking around with my shoulders back. I remember doing this to the point where my scapula was actually sore, and I'm not really built for that. I don't think I'm supposed to be one of those guys with like shoulders back down, chest sticking out. I'm more of I want to be kyphotic naturally. I want to be kind of hunched. So I'm a big fan of just doing things that happen automatically, which is why like for the computer setup, I'm a nerd. I've got a vertical mouse. I've had wrist issues. So I've got one of these where you're not just constantly in pronation, just pissing off your pronators all day. I've got a split keyboard. It's not in 2 pieces, but it's separated. If you're on a laptop, you're constantly in ulnar deviation. So you're going to get, like a TFCC ligament issue eventually. And then again with the monitor height. So I'm a much bigger fan of just setting up the environment to where you don't have to think about it. And then again, with the environment, putting things around you that movement snacks or mobility becomes automatic. I've got a bucket with bands on my porch. I've got a slant board and ropes and stuff. And my kids will walk by and just pick it up and start playing with it. I think that's a better tool than saying like, okay, I'm going to add to my checklist, make sure I have good posture. It's just one more mosquito.
Have an alarm go off every 15 minutes to like check in.
You guys have talked about like over optimizing. That's a good way to just over optimize and drive yourself crazy.
I like that you threw in terms of posture. You said even when you sleep. I had Achilles issues for over a decade. It was about 12, 13 years. I went to finally about a year ago or so, went to a physical therapist, and to his credit, he was the first one that the second question he asked me was, how do you sleep? And it was kind of like, that's strange. I'm talking about my Achilles, and, and really quickly he was like, how do you sleep? I explained it to him. He said, why don't you try this? This issue that I've been dealing with for 10 to 12 years essentially went away, no pun intended, overnight when I changed the way I slept. Because, maybe to fill in the blanks, when you sleep, if you sleep on your back, the sheets pull your toes down and you're in a
Contracted, yeah.
Contracted. I tended to sleep more on my side or my stomach, but it was the same thing. When I showed him how I slept, my toes just it goes into complete plantar flexion. Just completely. So he's like, why don't you wear one of those little braces, those little and not to try to increase, just to get you in neutral, just so you're in neutral, which was really painful for me. In the middle of the night, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so bad, because my ankles wanted to go uncomfortable, not pain. Gotcha. I should take that, especially talking to the pain guy. I should really qualify that. It was discomfort. I woke up in the middle of the night several times, wanting to take the thing off. By the next day though, woke up and I had to kind of baby step out of bed till it got warm enough. And by the time I got down the stairs, I was okay. By day 3, I felt springy. It was like, oh my God, I don't need all of these other things. So when you say the little exercise snacks or set up your environment, do you have any other similar things for sleep?
Ooh, I'm selfishly thinking a lot about your Achilles conversation. I'll come back to that, but I have to get this out because I've had Achilles issues for, I'm going on 6 years. Yeah. And I can do most of what I want to do, but if I go for a long run right now, both of my Achilles are pissed off, and I've been through just about everything I know how to do. And I think sometimes it's like, oh, I can solve anything. I'm a corrective exercise guy. But yeah, I love that. I'm gonna have to try that. So you wore braces on both ankles just to keep you
I wore it on my left. One was way more pissed off than my right. They were both bad, but I just wore it on my left. And the honest answer is because when I went to CVS, they only had one. Okay. So I wore my left.
One good Achilles. Which one's gonna be?
Well, the really bad one got to be the better of the two. And now it's like, I don't even wear it every night now because they're okay. And I can go and run and I can feel kind of springy in the morning. But over time, I do need to it's kind of like a retainer, right? You don't need to wear a retainer until you feel your teeth, until the retainer doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what that's my new practice is I don't wear it every night until I'm like, oh, Achilles I'm starting to feel that come back and I'll put it on. The other thing is I'm just a little bit more aware of when I'm falling asleep, I really try to keep my foot neutral and not default to, as you said, you like to be more kyphotic, more closed, and I just try to create that more awareness of staying.
It's a great I love that it's pure constraint theory. You found the one big lever that would make everything else easier. I'm gonna have to do that. I can tell you, my wife likes to tuck in the covers into the foot of the bed, and every time I feel that, I'm like a child and I start kicking it out. I'm like,
totally,
because I can feel it going in, and I'm like, can't do this.
You ever seen the Seinfeld where they're staying and they're talking
at the hotel?
At the hotel. So we have a tuck and a one no tuck. Jerry, you want a tuck?
Yeah.
You want non-tuck?
I'm a no tuck.
It doesn't matter,
yeah,
George. I'm a non-tuck.
So a solid 1990s reference from Ben.
Of course.
Yeah.
Big advocate for no tucking. It causes all kinds of marital problems out there today. I don't know. For sleep posture, I've tried, sleeping on stomach. It caused me lower back problems. I can't really sleep on my side without jacking up my shoulders. So, and I've talked to people about this. Your back is probably the best place to be unless you have some kind of apnea issue or something else that prevents you from being able to do that. My wife's had a lot of issues. She had a bad back injury when she was younger. There's been a lot of fallout from that. She has to sleep on her side. So some people do, but yeah, I like, just sleeping on your back. And I've been through all the fancy pillows anymore. A cheap kind of fluffy pillow you can stuff under your neck, on your back. That's my MO.
Okay. We've talked about, and Patrick, I'm I apologize if I'm hijacking a little bit, but we just talked about our back. We just talked about shoulder when you sleep. You have this preventing the big three concept, right? And I'd love for you to take that, but I also wanted to just, the quote that you have leading to that chapter, I just love so much, which is, it isn't the mountain ahead of us that wears us out. It's the grain of sand in your shoe. So just wanted to throw that little thing over time that just like gnaws away. Such a good quote. And you have a lot of really great quotes that lead off these chapters. But if we've talked about back, we've talked about shoulder, are those part of the big three, or what are the big three?
Yeah, I think just based on search volume, well, by far number one is the back or low back. I looked at just Google searches of, low back versus other joints, and it's like low back pain eclipses all other joint searches combined. That is the number one, complaint, most common issue. But yeah, in the book, I have low back pain, shoulder pain, and knee pain. And those are important fulcrums throughout the body. So my idea was, if I can educate people on these three joints and they can get in a good place, it's going to prevent a lot of the downstream issues. Even with shoulders, a lot of elbow pain comes from poor shoulder mechanics. I remember being in my 20s, I had a golfer's elbow and medial epicondylitis, went to see a physical therapist. Immediately he goes to work on my shoulders. I'm like, what are you doing? The pain's in my elbow. He's like, yeah, but you don't know how to pull up properly. You're basically doing like some kind of front curl with your elbows, and that's why. But yeah, that's why I picked those three, because they're most common three complaints. And also they have a downstream effect. Even with knees, if you get really good knee mobility, you're more likely to have healthy ankles and feet and hips. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. What when you say knee mobility, I don't think that's a normal thing that people think about. I think people usually think about mobility happening at the ankles, hips,
Sure.
and shoulders, like the multi-rotational things. And I think that in knees, it's just like, well, okay, if I can get my heel to my butt, is that mobility? And maybe, mobility is a big part of what you talk about. Can we just frame up what mobility is? Is mobility flexibility, or is it something different?
Sure. In the book, I talk about flexibility versus mobility, and I describe flexibility as being passive range of motion. Like a good example is you can reach down and touch your toes. That's an example of flexibility. Whereas mobility is more about being able to control a load. So there's a strength component, a control component. So if you can, let's say, do an RDL, you can bend down with weights and touch the ground and stand back up and keep good posture, and you can hip hinge properly. That's a good demonstration of mobility. So there's some overlap, but I think mobility has a strength and control component to me.
So if we're thinking about those big three, what is maybe like the first place? Maybe just give us like a first principle or a first checkpoint or a first thing that we should be if back pain is double all the rest. Maybe we'll just start there. If someone has back pain, and I kind of asked this earlier a little bit, so maybe, but what would be like the appropriate kind of steps? Is it back away and then learn about it, as you said, then go to work, rebuild the house? So is that because I also don't think people think of back as tendon type stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's more spinal. And it's also this really scary thing, right? Your back is
Sure. High risk.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah, my thoughts have changed on this even in the last few years, because I used to be a lot more aggressive, get in there and fix it, address it head on. But especially with low back, this is a stability joint. You guys may have heard of something called the joint by joint concept, where our body has this wonderful setup where you have an alternating system between stability and mobility joints, all the way from your head down to your feet. And so the low back is a stability joint. Right beneath that are your hips, which is a mobility joint. And then up toward your thoracic scapula area, you could call that a mobility joint. So I think what happens is people are overusing their low back instead of kind of leaving it alone and bracing and holding it tight. So I would say for low back pain specifically, don't stretch it. I see people, you can tell they're in pain and they're like pulling on their low back. That's going to piss it off. I think you're better off mobilizing your hips, activating your glutes, and then going above it, working on thoracic extension in a way that doesn't upset your low back. Just by working on the joints above and below it, you're naturally going to take the tension point in the system away from your low back, and that's something you can apply to any joint. So I would say that's the first thing, is find a way to give it some space, work on the joints above and below it. You mobilize those, it might just resolve on its own without having to go in and dig into it with an elbow or do an injection or stretch it every day.
So good. Yeah. That's, I just want to, that's exactly the way I see people mishandle backs, is they do the exact opposite of what they should be doing. They go and they try and do all this spinal twisting stuff because it feels good when you do that. Right. There's immediate relief, but that's not beneficial. Instead, what we should be doing is working on the mobility, if you want flexibility, downstream and upstream of the low back, right? So work the hip flexors, adductors, hamstrings, glutes, like get open those things up. Same thing upstream with the thoracic. But then the other thing that they're missing, because they're so afraid of it, is the strengthening of the lower back. People don't strengthen their lower back. Very, very few people are. First off, you can't see it in a mirror, so no one's like, yo, check out my rectors.
Check out my low back.
Yeah. Right. But that would solve so much, right? If I think it was Poliquin was like basically like if you create like the most robust back, everything, including your bench press, goes up. Everything stems from, I think the psoas is getting a lot of attention, but the singular muscle that connects lower body to upper body. But the lower back, going back to Patrick's definition of your book, being robust, and because it's not trained, and because the other areas are tight, it becomes so fragile that when people do try to train it, that's when injury occurs. So instead, working some very slow, going back to your 5 second down, 5 second up, you could imagine instead of, yes, jump into a CrossFit class and start working on 225 deadlifts for 21:15.9 in a fatigued state, probably not setting yourself up for success for building robustness in your lower back. As opposed to, what if we just did some, partial RDLs, work on the hip hinging with an empty barbell, right? And then progressive overload to where you're doing 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up. Do that. We're training like we mean it 3 times a week, going up like just 5 pounds each time. You could see really quickly how that chain through the lower back, it just totally changed it. So I think people need to stop being afraid of training it,
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't have it all figured out. And I tell people all the time, I'm just a regular guy with joint pain. And I think I was built with like bird-like joints for whatever reason, very injury prone. And I still have issues I'm working through. I have if I go and squat heavy still to this day with a barbell, I think it's just facet joint syndrome. For whatever reason, my low back is kind of compression intolerant. So if I overdo that or I'm stacking weight on me, I just get this vague low back pain, and it makes it hard to do anything. And, to your point about low back boosting everything else, look at the opposite situation. For anybody who's had back pain, you can't do anything. You can't even breathe properly. You can't even go do a set of curls if you want without hurting your low back. So it's, so important. And I think stability, I think it's starting. I see the tide shifting more to people talking about this more. Mobility is very hot right now. Everything's, I think these people with like connective tissue disorders doing like, check out this extreme stretching routine. I've got Ehlers-Danlos and I can do the splits. So you should be able to do it as well. There's still a lot of that, but I see people talking more about stability before mobility. And for me, I'm not the stretchiest guy, but I can tell you, if my back pain flares up, the first thing I'm going to go in and do some version of Stuart McGill's Big 3 for back pain, where you're doing a modified curl up, you're kind of activating your core, maybe some transverse abdominis stuff where you're sucking in. There's a bird dog exercise, which is great for keeping your core really strong, but mobilizing your glutes and even your upper body. Those things give me relief. So back to the idea of like stop stretching your low back and twisting and doing all this stuff. Sometimes just stabilizing and activating the musculature in your core will allow everything else to chill out and get out of like high level threat mode. But I think stability before mobility is a really important concept for everybody, but especially, again, novices, really important concept.
We're sponsored this time around by Monarch, a personal finance app that helps you see all your accounts, track spending, and build towards your financial goals in one simple place. One of the things that is a factor in maintaining weight loss for folks who have been able to do it is that they regularly check in on the number on the scale. In the same way, Monarch lets you continuously, easily, and consistently check in on your spending and your savings so that it always remains front of mind. We're always aware of where we are, reminding ourselves where we're trying to get to, also that we can take the actions we need to live in accordance with our financial goals. One thing I love is that they will regularly send you emails with updates on your various budget categories, so you're never blind to where you might be overspending. Whether you're trying to build savings, pay down debt, or just get a clearer picture of where your money goes, Monarch makes it simple. This new year, achieve your financial goals for good. Monarch is the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Head to monarch.com, use the code excellence to get 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com. Use the code excellence to get 50% off your first year. Let's go back to the 5 causes of joint pain dysfunction. We talked about posture. Let's go to the next one, movement, quality, and variation. How do we get these things wrong and then cause more joint pain and dysfunction than is necessary?
Sure. Yeah, those are 2 things I've lumped together. Movement quality, I'll just touch on briefly. That's really form, understanding what proper form is, and not putting yourself in a position to get hurt. I think movement variation deserves more attention. Katie Bowman is a biomechanist, and she talks a lot about how just having a diverse set of movement is one of the best ways to prevent your body from getting injured. There's a really cool story from, I don't know if you guys remember Biosphere 2. Is that experiment in the 90s? They had this like 3-acre dome, not the Pauly Shore movie, but the actual.
That's where my brain went to immediately. Nobody's in the juice.
Yeah. Yeah. The real Biosphere 2, I think they shut it down within 2 years. It just went haywire. Everything started dying off. Cockroaches proliferated. The people broke into factions and were fighting. It just went haywire. But one of the weird things that happened a few months into the experiment is they had these trees that they brought in and planted. These giant oak trees just started snapping, just crack, 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 like a snowstorm or something. But there was nothing going on, and they could not figure out what was going on until they started basically digging into these trees to figure out what was structurally different. And the difference between the trees in Biosphere 2 and regular trees were the trees in the Biosphere didn't have what they call stress wood, which is basically the result of being bent in all these infinite array of forces from wind, from storms, putting rain on the leaves, pulling, from animals climbing. The most diverse possible array of forces on the trees, and that creates something called stress wood, not unlike how you might see microfractures in bones from powerlifters that heal and become stronger. So anyway, it was the lack of movement variety that fell the trees, which is really interesting. And I think it's a good analogy for us. Without that variety of movement, I'll say it this way. You can't go to the gym and mimic all the natural variety of forces you get in everyday life. If you're going to garden, take your dog for a walk, like just those 2 things, you're moving in so many different positions. You might be better off doing that than going to the gym and working on your low back pain. Maybe go out and garden. But I do think movement variety is something that, especially in our modern sedentary lifestyle, needs a lot more attention.
You talk about the difference or the distinction between movement and exercise, and that movement is more important in many ways than exercise. Yeah.
And I think, people are motivated by weight loss, but if you look at weight loss, most of your calorie burning is NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You're burning your most calories just through your natural body processes and not moving. And I would say the majority of inputs into your kinetic system, they're not exercise, it's other things. So yeah, it's part of therapy. It's not like, I do my exercise and my stretching, and then by the way, I go and do these other things. It's all connected. It's all integrated. I think we have to see it that way.
Next one on your list is muscle imbalances. What does that mean?
This gets really sciencey, but I think it's an important resource for people to understand. I mean, the most common one is just like a agonist-antagonist imbalance where you've got opposing muscle groups on each side of the body. Most of us are very strong and tight relatively on the front of our body versus the back and the upper body. We've got tight hypertonic pecs and kind of latent or stretched out and weak posterior shoulder complex. That's pretty typical. Typically people's quads are too strong for their hamstrings, which is why you see some like sprinting hamstring tears. So This is a tough one because it gets really heavy. And I think people get into this part and like, well, I'm not going to be a corrective exercise specialist. What am I going to remember all this stuff? But just understanding some of the basic categories and then how to counter train against that to prevent it is really helpful. A big part of that is just making counter training or contra training where you're purposely doing things that combat your everyday lifestyle. That's probably your best defense against muscle imbalances. So if I know I'm typing all day, I better be doing a lot of mobilizing for my chest and anterior shoulder complex, a lot of external rotation. If you're a distance runner, you should know that's destabilizing for your knees, and you're going to have to do a lot of work, let's say with hip structure and knee structure. So I think instead of trying to understand all the muscle imbalances, just thinking like, okay, what problems am I creating by my everyday lifestyle? And then how can I compensate for that with my training priorities? That's probably the best entrance point.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think we can safely assume that most people listening to this are likely sitting most of the day. So
Yeah.
Can you walk us through a little bit of this idea of contra training, which I think is a fascinating concept? What would you recommend for somebody? And then where do they fit that into? Let's just say they go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. They do some sort of functional training. They go to a CrossFit gym or something similar. Where does that fit in, and how do they make all of those pieces fit together?
That's a really good question. And I think that, again, a very simple, blunt instrument way to think about it is prioritize the back part of your body, your posterior chain. And we like our pecs and our biceps, but prioritizing that, maybe even to the point of doing 3 sets of back for every 2. That's a very simple way to look at it. Same for the lower body. Mobilizing the hips is important, but I'm a big fan of prioritizing hamstrings first. Again, for our weightlifters out there, usually people like to go in and crawl onto the leg press or squat bar first. I advocate for starting with hamstrings, and I think you're going to prevent a lot of knee injuries that way. I think this is where I have to challenge people to change how they're thinking about corrective exercise in general. Because as I'm talking, it's like, how do you fit this in, or where do you prioritize it? I think one of the big problems is people look at this stuff like, how can I do the bare minimum and then go back to doing what I want? I'm going to do my weightlifting or do my endurance training, do the bare minimum so I don't hurt myself and then move on. But what I really challenge people to do is, what if you flip that on its head just for 4 weeks? Instead of doing 90% traditional stuff and then 5 to 10%, let's call it corrective exercise or prep or mobility. What if you did 90% of this stuff? And I'm not saying standing in the corner and, just like doing bands for half an hour, but finding ways to prioritize exercises that you can load up and build strength and muscle on, but also naturally prevent these, shoulder problems. Like, let's say you're starting with something like a face pull, or you're doing, rows with a dumbbell that require more stabilization. I think we can make some small changes here and start moving in the direction of preventing muscle imbalances without completely upending your workout program. But yeah, in the book, I'm like, hey, just work with me for 4 weeks. Try this. We're going to go hard on this corrective exercise, which maybe we need a new name for that. But go hard on that. See where you're at in 4 weeks. How do your hips feel? How's your low back feel? How does it feel crawling under a squat bar? Do you feel stronger? I think it's one of those take it 1 step back, 2 steps forward kind of situations. So I think that's where we have to start. We have to shift our priorities.
Love that. We talked about tendinopathy a little bit already. So that would be the 4th of the 5 causes of joint pain or dysfunction. And the last one, arthritis, aging, and collagen degradation.
Sure. Yeah. And some of this, it's natural. We are going to see atrophy of not just muscles, but connective tissue eventually. But there's a lot more that we can do here, I think, than we realized, let's say 10 years ago. So we talked about supplements. I think that's important. I think collagen actually could be a really important lever here. We know that our ability to produce collagen keeps decreasing with age. Now that you hear different stats, it's something like you lose 1% of your ability to produce collagen after 30 every year. So you can see that gets negative really quickly. The heavy, slow resistance training is very important here because you're not just training muscles with that, you're training connective tissue, you're building tendons to keep pace with the muscles. And then when it comes to cartilage metabolism and just general cartilage maintenance, just doing some kind of load training, just continuing to move, keeping yourself healthy enough with all the things we've talked about so that when you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s, you can still do load training and still maintain your bone mass, still maintain your cartilage mass. And I think that's why we see such a drop off in those age brackets, is because the other issues that have cropped up over time prevent them from doing that load training. Whereas if we've prepared people properly, they should be still able to load up well into senior age groups.
I have one more question then, Ben. I'll let you ask the last one or two. You mentioned something earlier in the conversation about going to see a PT maybe once a quarter. Never crossed my mind. I think about going to a PT as like, something's broken, I need some help.
Yeah.
But I love this idea of it being a proactive. This is just kind of part of what we do, right? Every quarter, every 90 days, we do a check-in, we figure out where we're at, we get a sense of what's not working or needs some work, and then a plan ahead. Can you just talk a little bit more about the importance of that? Because again, I don't know that a lot of people think about that as a proactive activity versus a reactive one.
Yeah. I mean, it's so simple and so powerful. Well, I'll start here with the practical recommendation and then talk about my experience, and maybe that'll answer your question. But I would go to a PT. Hopefully your insurance covers it. If it doesn't, maybe it's worth paying $100, $150 out of pocket, depending on where you are. But it's something you could feasibly do in one session. What I'd say is go to your PT and say, hey, here's what I want to do. I have some little aches and pains. I don't have anything major traumatic. I'd like your help doing some screening, figure out where my weak points are. What do you see in my posture, in my gait, in my movements that could create problems? And then just help me develop a plan for that. So within one session, they can basically spend most of their time screening you, asking you questions, and then they write you a little program. It's like, hey, here's what I'd focus on. Here's some exercises to do every day, or here's what I do with your shoulders once a week. And so you have your homework. You do that as part of your prep, 5 minutes a day, half an hour a week, and then next quarter go back. You're going to prevent a lot of problems before they become problems, because a good PT will see this stuff. I have a few different people I use. Elena Curry is one of our physical therapists on our advisory board. But she's just very good with movement. She's like a savant with watching people move. But she picked up that in my gait, watching me walk barefoot, most people invert, their foot collapses in toward their big toe. I was actually everting. And she was like, that's interesting. I don't see that a lot. Usually people go the other way. So we got to talking, and I had recently been to one of those fancy footwear stores, and they came up with some custom soles for me. And I think that was actually reinforcing that, because they built it the way my foot is shaped. So it was reinforcing that pattern, and that was creating extra stress on my Achilles. So not quite as transformational as Ben's example, but it was like, oh, I'm wearing shoes that are constantly causing me to micro contract my Achilles with every step. Let's get rid of that and go back to flat footwear. So that's an example of something that a good PT will see. Say, hey, looks like you're a little like jacked up in your squat. Looks like your right hip is, pinching a little bit. Let's mobilize that. So before you even experience pain, they might solve the issue.
Yeah, and that reminds me what we talked about right at the top, which is this idea that like pain is telling us something, right? And I think if we believe that pain is telling us, or reinforcing the belief that, I guess we're just getting old, then we won't go and say, hey, this thing is bugging me and I don't think it should. Can you help me come up with a way to strengthen it or improve it or whatever? But again, if our default state is, I guess this is just what happens when we get old, then you won't even have the thought of, I could actually improve this, if not prevent it from getting any worse.
Yeah. I think we need to raise our standards for what is our pain-free, like homeostasis, our set point of pain. Because just today I had a conversation with a friend, and he's like, yeah, the shoulder's bugging me. We talked about it, and I felt around. I'm like, yeah, you might want to get that looked at. And how long that's been going on? He's like, 10 years. I'm like, especially for somebody that they're dedicated to fitness, it's a big part of their life. But we have this weird cognitive bias. I don't know what it is. With me, maybe it's ego, but we're like, I can just get through it. You deserve, you don't have to run to imaging and run the surgery route, but you deserve to go get some help with that and figure out, how can I address this and fix it? If for no other reason, it's holding you back from performing. But yeah, it's funny that the more dedicated people are, the more likely they are to just deal with stuff that they probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Love that. Dan, last question to you.
One before my last, because you just kind of spurred it with the conversation you just had about the analysis of your gait and how maybe the fix exacerbated it. Where in terms of your kind of framework do feet fall into play? Because if everything is sort of upstream or downstream, it's sort of like your feet are the things that are, everything is upstream of that. You talk about feet and what normal feet look like in your book, but where does that fall in? If somebody has an issue, do you go there, or is it like, no, if you have a foot thing, focus on feet?
I mean, I would say feet are super important, foundationally important for everything from Achilles, ankles, knees, up to hips. And this is something I've learned a lot more about in the last few years, and I put more emphasis on. But yeah, I mean, if you've got I call them like lazy feet, it's not necessarily you have a flat feet architecture naturally, but you just don't know how to activate your feet. They're just kind of these pads that stick to the floor. You don't know about, kind of creating a tripod of pressure between the ball of your foot and big toe and pinky side. Most people aren't thinking about that. But yeah, I think some barefoot training responsibly is certainly in order and definitely worth a look. Because I know for me, when I started having ankle pain early in life, I didn't know anything about feet. I had no ability to like kind of hold myself in a little bit of an eagle's talons grasp. So I think there's exercises where you're picking up towels and things and with your feet and putting them down to challenge that musculature. But yeah, to answer your question directly, yeah, I think feet should be a huge consideration for anything lower body because a lot of times that's the source of the problem. And without good feet control, or at least like good neuromuscular control and activation, you're going to have a wobbly chain going up from the start.
Cool. So what my last one would be, where would be people listen to this and they're like, oh, recognizing maybe it's not normal that I have the joint pain, raise the standards. Scott said a lot. What's the first, like if you had one thing for people to kind of walk away from this with, what would be the one sort of first principle, or if you want to, what would be the first thing you'd suggest people do?
I would have to go back to the relationship people have with what I call corrective exercise. I just had a good conversation with John Welburn, and he was like, I think we've done a crappy job as an industry selling this. Even corrective exercise sounds boring. And he's like, I just call it prep. Go do the prep. It's like, okay, that's a little easier to swallow. But I would say the shift in mindset that you're going to be able to do everything you're doing right now, which has caused you a lot of pain, and then find some hack or minimal time investment thing that gets you back to where you were and then just move on. It just doesn't work like that. And I think once people accept that, okay, this is part of my life, it's something I have to think about, not obsess about, but prioritize it and make it part of your training program. Instead of just doing 5 minutes of stretching at the end, bake it into the middle of your workout, program these things like you would program resistance training or endurance training. I think that's the first shift, because it's kind of a non-starter if people are just, again, tacking on a couple stretches at the end of the workout. It wasn't good enough to keep you from getting hurt, and you're not getting any younger, so it's not going to keep you from getting hurt in the future and preventing pain either. So not the most positive answer, I guess, but I think it is positive. Once people see like, oh, wow, I just freed this up in my hip. That chain is only as strong as its weakest link. That's very true in your kinetic chain. So you fix that weak link, everything gets better. So it actually becomes fun instead of like, oh, I'm just focusing on everything that hurts and my weaknesses. No, you fix your rotator cuff, your bench press is going to be better. That's fun. So I think the mindset shift is what I would say.
Love that. Scott, thank you so much. This has been great. The book's called Built from Broken, a science-based guide to healing painful joints, preventing injuries, and rebuilding your body. It's out now, so you can get it anywhere you get your favorite books. There you go, Ben. Scott, thank you so much. Best of luck with the book. Best of luck with everything you're working on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so very much for tuning into the show this week. 2 quick things before you go. First, if you want even more from this episode, go check out the full 5-3-1 breakdown. We give you the 5 big ideas from the episode, 3 reflection questions to help you process it all, and 1 key takeaway that you can put into action right now. The link is in the show notes. The second thing, while you're there, check out the Chase Club. It's our premium membership where we include bonus content, ad-free episodes, and a brand new Chase Tracker app. Check it all out at chasingexcellence.email.